What makes us a follower of Jesus? What does that mean to be a follower of Jesus? And so I wanted us to think deeply about what does that mean? What does the basics mean? Because all of us have been in church for many, many years. We can get involved in lots of things and then realize actually it doesn't seem to be much about following Jesus. And so it's about getting back to the basics. So what does that mean to be a follower of Jesus? If you think about it, two passages historically have really defined what it means to be a Christian. And that's Matthew 22, and that's the Great Commandment, which I'm going to start talking about next week. And it's this passage here, Matthew 28, which is the Great Commission. Those two passages really summarize. Now, you need the rest of the Bible. But if someone was going to ask you, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? What does it mean to be a Christian? You wouldn't go wrong if you captured these two passages and shared that with the person. The Great Commandment and the Great Commission. And I just really want to finish off talking about the Great Commission this morning, sort of summarize it. But let me just read through the text one last time. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. This is Jesus' words to the disciples just before he ascends to heaven. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So, the Great Commission, as I said, is Jesus' last words to his disciples, so they're really important. I'm gathering the last words he said were what he wanted to leave them with most of all. And what was the Great Commission about? Well, it's going and making disciples, baptizing, in other words, initiating people into faith, getting people saved, and then teaching them to obey him, teaching them to obey Jesus. And so when I went through this passage over the last few weeks, I spoke about how the Great Commission is the authorizing and empowering of a community in a lifelong adventure with Jesus. It's like an overview. It's the big picture of what is the Great Commission about. You've got to see it as a lifelong adventure. If you think it's something you do in a couple of years, then your faith will falter. It's a lifelong journey. And it's a journey not meant to be done alone. It's meant to be done in community. Jesus was speaking to a community of 11 men. It would then turn into, a few weeks later, a community of 120. And then the Spirit was poured out, and then it started to be a community of thousands of people. But the point is, it's a community. And right there, Jesus is empowering them and authorizing them to go and do what actually he's been doing for the last 3 years. They're meant to continue what he started. The Great Commission is also both getting people saved and learning to obey. So making disciples is not just bringing people to faith, as important as that is. It's actually essential. That's the essential first step. I think every one of us will remember the time that we came to faith. I remember that time. But I only came to faith once. After I came to faith, I didn't need to come to faith a second time. What I needed to then do after that is to start obeying what Jesus commanded me to do. So making disciples is just not evangelizing. That's the start. But then, and for most of our Christian journey, it's actually learning to obey Jesus. And this last week, I talked about this, is that the Great Commission, and at the very center of the Great Commission is this two words in English, one word in Greek, making disciples, which means helping each other become obedient for the end purpose of being changed to be like Jesus. So we need to think of the end purpose. Our end purpose is to become like Jesus. So we don't obey just for the sake of it. We obey because through being obedient, we are then transformed into being like Jesus. Here's the point that I wanted to get home last week is that we need to help each other. We need to disciple one another. We need to be disciples and be disciplers. You know what? The best person to disciple you if you're married is your wife or your husband, if they're a believer, that is. That's the best person, that's the best discipler in your life because they know you the best. They know your edges. They know the things you struggle with. You know, when you live with someone, you can't hide anything from people. I remember when I was a young Christian, I was living with a group of 5 other Christian guys. And did I get to know them? Absolutely. When you live with people, you can't hide. You can't hide your faults. You can try to. You can probably do a really good job of hiding, but eventually the other people discover. And you know, and that's a good thing. When we need to help one another. We need to disciple one another. I need to disciple my wife. My wife needs to disciple me. Like I said last week, Susie is my best discipler. She's discipling me because she knows me more than anyone else. There could be other people, and there should be other people in your life to help disciple. But the main person is your spouse, or if you're single, it's your best Christian friend. If you're single, it's your best Christian friend. Now, here's the thing. Hopefully, we've got a number of people in our life discipling us. And hopefully, we've got people in our life who we're discipling. It's mutual. It's mutual. Discipleship is mutual. But we need to be willing to be discipled. We can't obey Jesus' commandment unless we're willing to be discipled. So we need to acknowledge someone else has got something I need that they can help me with. That's why I use this language of helping. Because sometimes when we think of disciple, we think of it's someone telling me what to do or berating me and telling me how bad I am. That's not discipleship. There is moments where we have to correct or challenge, but they're in the context of relationship. Most of the time, it should be helping. And that's why I'm saying your spouse, your friend. When we think of our Christian friends, we think they're people that I need to help me become more like Jesus. They're meant to help me, come alongside to help. That's what discipleship is. One of the important things to remember is that it's not just added biblical knowledge. Yes, we do need that, but the purpose of that increased biblical knowledge is to affect change in our life. In other words, it's developing Christian character. Developing Christian character. Don't mistake character for personality. Don't make the mistake of mixing these two up. Personality is God-given. Character is developed. So, you know, each one of us has been given God has given a personality to. That's why we should never despise someone's personality. Do you know some people, you meet them and you are attracted to their personality? It's true, right? We don't understand why, but we do. Some people, we meet them and their personality repels us. Let's be honest about that. But here's the thing. Don't despise personalities. If there's a personality that repels you, remember that's God-given. So we should never despise someone's personality. God gave it to them. We may not particularly connect. That's okay. You don't have to. But God gave personality. But here's the thing. Character is developed. I remember when I was living in this house with 5 other guys, there was a guy in that house who was just he had an amazing personality. He used to attract so many people. I mean, when you're around him, you would feel like you're the center of the universe. Ever met people like that? But after living with him for 18 months, he had some massive holes in his character. I mean, massive. He was probably about one of the most unreliable people I've ever met. Most unreliable, like just and disorganized. You could not rely on him. After living with him for 18 months, it was like, yeah, okay. Love the personality. But do you know, you get to a point you're going, there needs to be more. He needs to be more than personality. Now, here's the thing. That's God-given, that personality. I didn't despise the personality. He just needed to develop character. My hope is that he would have developed his character and people would have got into his life and had the courage to be truthful with him and loved him and told him the truth and challenged him to work on some of these things about his character. People can have very attractive personalities but weak characters. People can have very attractive personalities but weak characters. We need to develop our character. That's a very integral part of discipleship making. Character development. Our character is developed and is a result of our intention of what we have chosen and done. The development of our character is something that we've intentionally done, something that we've intentionally chosen. To be a kind person is not to do one kind act, but to be intentionally kind over and over again until kindness becomes who we are. So I'm not a kind person if I just do one kind act. But as I do it over and over again, and over and over again, and over and over again, I then become a kind person. To be a reliable and faithful person is not to be reliable and faithful once, but to be intentionally reliable and faithful over and over again until faithful becomes who I am. That's character. And that's what God wants to develop in us. That's what discipleship making is. We create so many problems when we mistake personality for character. We're swayed by people, they're so wonderful people, but what sort of character do they have? And you don't ascertain that in a meeting. You watch what people do over and over again. You observe their life. That's how you discern character. And we need to look at our own life. See, the Great Commission calls us to obedience to Jesus. Obedience to Jesus is intentionally modeling our life on his. Jesus' character, Jesus' disposition, Jesus' spirit, Jesus' wisdom. That's what discipleship making is. We model our life on Jesus. Making disciples includes helping each other develop our Christian character and overcome our character weaknesses. Helping one another develop Christian character and overcoming our character weaknesses, because we all have character weaknesses. We all do. Now, I'm just going to mention some extremes. These are extremes, right? So we will find ourselves somewhere on the spectrum between one of them. Do we overwork or are we lazy? Are we naive or suspicious and cynical? Do we struggle with self-condemnation or being prideful? Are we ambitiously driven or lack motivation and purpose? Are we superficial and shallow or too intense? Do we struggle to feel emotion or are we overly sensitive? Are we timid and lack courage or are we arrogant and demanding? Do we spend money recklessly or are we tight and stingy? See, they're all extremes, and all of those extremes are character weaknesses. We need to develop character to come somewhere in the middle, to not be extremes. So here's the question. Have you grown in your Christian character this year? Or last year? Have you grown in your Christian character last year? Do you have a vision and resolve to grow in Christian character this year? To allow others to help you with your character weaknesses, to become stronger in Christian character. That's what discipleship making is. We remember the goal. What's the goal? To be transformed into the image of Jesus. To be like him. He's our model. So we need to help one another. When we think about the essence of what it means to follow Jesus, we need to remember it's that journey of becoming more developed in our Christian character. That's a challenge. That's why we can't do it alone. That's why we need people to help us, and we need to help people. And that's why it has to be done in relationship. It can't be done through a program. It has to be done in the midst of relationship. Because if it's just a program, you just put on your best Christian face, put on your best Christian face, but then at home, you're a different person. You know, discipleship is doing life with people and looking at you going, and it's not, see, here's the thing, sometimes we've got this image of it will just happen. No, it doesn't happen, just happen. It doesn't just happen, it has to be intentional. Because most of us will struggle with the courage to have those difficult conversations. We need to learn how to have them. So you know, how are you going with that unforgiveness you had towards that person? How are you going with that? That's a good discipleship question. You're opening up a conversation. How are you going with that? Now, they could shut it down. That's their choice. Fine, they shut it down. That's their choice. But it might lead to going, well, yeah, I am really struggling. I don't know what to do. Discipleship conversation. How are you doing with that lust issue? That sort of conversation should happen between men all the time. Because men are more liable to have lust difficulties than women. That's just the way it is. So you need to be comfortable with asking that question mainly amongst men. You know, how are you going with that commitment you made to this or that? You know, it's just an informal invitation to have a conversation about this journey of strengthening our Christian character. You know, and it happens within relationship. And here's the thing, it's two-way. It's not one way. We need to see that we're all in this together. Here's the question, can we really do this? Can we really do it? It's hard. You think about that and you go, wow. Start to sweat already. Wow. can we really do this? Well, Jesus always has the answer. And it's in the very last words. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. The promise of Jesus' ongoing presence forever is with his disciples. The promise is to his disciples, not to others. The promise is to his disciples. He's talking to the 11. One gave up, but there's 11 now. He's talking to them. The promise is to his disciples, to those and those that would become disciples after them. It is his presence, it is his empowerment that gives us the ability to be able to become disciples. We can't do this in our own strength. We can't change our weak character flaws in our own ability. You can't do it. You can only do it with the empowerment of his Spirit. That's why there's one of the reasons why Pentecost is so important, the outpouring of his Spirit. That was his empowerment. You can't do it without him. We need him to be with us. We need to not make the mistake of attempting to follow Jesus without him. You can't do it without him. That's why cultivating the presence of Jesus and the relational aspect of our Christian life is so important. Because we see in the Bible that people had a real relationship with Jesus. Do you know they talked to him? They felt his presence. You know, there was moments where together there was a real sense of he was there. We see that in the Bible, but then we live at a lower level. We go, well, I just can't, that's not for me. Or theologically we explain it away and go, well, you don't need that. Absolutely you do. Why would he say that? Why would Jesus say, I'll be with you forever, and then and think, well, no, it's just in my head. It's just a belief. No, it's not. He's with you. When he says he's going to be with you, he's going to be with you. I mean, he's not a liar. He's not trying to trick you and say, well, it's only in your beliefs that I'm with you. No, he meant I'm actually really going to be with you. And he's with us by his Spirit. So we need him. We can't do it. We can't do the Great Commission without Jesus. Just in finishing, here's the simplest way I can think of to describe the Great Commission. Surrender and obey. Surrender and obey. So we need to surrender. We need to stop fighting what the Lord wants. We need to give in to him instead of trying to find an alternative. Like there's going to be some other alternative that will give me peace. There's no other alternative. Peace comes from Jesus, from surrender to him. And obey. Simply obey whatever he asks of us, as difficult as this may be. And firstly, the starting point was we obey what the scriptures say. It's pretty simple. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's simple. It's not easy. We need the Holy Spirit to empower us. But it's simple. We don't need to go off and discover ourselves on top of a mountain. That's what I'm saying. It's here. We know what to do. We need to just get back to the basics. Surrender and obey. And invite other people into our lives to help us, knowing we can't do it on our own. And it's challenging, I know, to allow people into our inner world. But as we grow in relationship, we start to do that. We start to allow people in. And we go, and we admit, I can't do this by myself. I'm struggling with this. Can you help me? I think you can help me. Can you help me? What do you think I should do? Knowing they're people as well, they're not God. But as we do that, we find God uses people to help us. And we take their wisdom and go, yep, okay. Yep. And as we do that and do that in humility, we find the grace of God. See, God sees that. He sees that humility. And that's where he is. That's where he moves. That's where he speaks, when we humble ourselves. That's where God's grace is. But when we put up a wall and go, no, I can't learn anything from you, or you got to be like this to be my disciple, or, whatever. I mean, then we cut off the grace of God in our lives. And it's amazing how God talks through, any person. A new believer can be a discipler. God can speak through a new believer, just with innocent, sincere wisdom from heaven, And it's not the person, it's God using them. So as we take that position of humility, we start to see God do things and we start to see changes in our character that we've struggled with our whole life. That's my testimony. Living in the light and no longer having areas of our life living in darkness. Let me just leave that here. Father, I thank you that